Hello everyone, this is the Demonic Tutor, giving you another video on Draft. This time we are previewing the new Star Wars Unlimited set, Shadows of the Galaxy. Now, what's the purpose of this video? Well, I want to give you the basics on the new cards and mechanics of Shadows of the Galaxy. Just so you know, the basic draft principles I cover in my videos on how to draft Spark of the Rebellion. So if you haven't seen those videos, I strongly suggest you see them. I will put them in the video description below. Now, what are the goals of this video more specifically? Number one, I want to provide a general framework on how we evaluate a new set. Of course, provided that we are thinking specifically about drafting this set. We're going to explore how the new mechanics, bounty, capture, and smuggle, impact the draft and how they impact gameplay. We are also going to highlight key commons and uncommons in the set, since those are the bread and butter of draft games, as well as trap, rares, and legendaries. These are cards that we're probably going to be passing around that won't be very useful to us in draft. So we're going to start by providing an evaluation framework. That is, how do we think about a new set that we're drafting? How do we evaluate the cards? How do we figure out which cards are good and which ones are not? We're going to start with the overall principle that the most valuable cards in draft will have a big immediate impact on the board state on their own. And that's a really key phrase there, on their own. They're cards that don't need other cards to be good. Most obvious example is Maul, the 7/6 for 7 resources green villainy unit that has ambush and overwhelm, and on attack it may direct its damage done to Maul to another underworld unit. It's very obvious why Maul is good. It can attack for big damage, it can push damage onto base, it can remove an opponent's unit, it's going to make an impact, it doesn't need any other cards there to know that it's good. However, many cards in Shadows require us to meet certain conditions to create value. And we'll talk about those cards, specifically bounty cards. And so how do we evaluate those cards? Well, we need to ask a couple of questions. First of all, if we need to meet conditions to create value, how often are we going to meet those conditions? How many cards in the set allow us to create those conditions that will create value? And then the last question we need to ask is the payoff for meeting those conditions worth it? Okay? Because, you know, we might be encouraged to do things that we normally wouldn't want to do in a regular game. Is going out of our way to get these rewards going to make enough of an impact? Okay. So that brings us straight into the first mechanic, and I think it's probably the biggest kind of question mark regarding the set and how we evaluate, and that's bounty. First, talk about the rules for bounty. When you capture or defeat a unit with bounty, you will receive the listed benefit. So sometimes bounties come as upgrades. Typically, you are going to upgrade an opponent's unit, and it essentially gives you a reward if you defeat or capture that unit. So in this case, Death Mark, we can attach this as a bounty of drawing 2 cards. So if we defeat the opponent's unit, we could draw those 2 cards, right? Bounties are also hard printed on certain units' text boxes, right? And so the unit might be overpowered. In this case, a 1-drop for a 1/4 for High-Low Bond Enforcer. It has grit, so it can be a pretty powerful card. It's a lot for a 1-drop. However, the drawback is that it has a bounty, is that if it gets defeated, the opponent will get to draw a card. So what are my thoughts on bounty? Well, I've looked at all of the bounties, specifically the bounties that are on upgrades. And I personally don't really find many of the rewards are game changing. It doesn't mean that the rewards aren't useful, but these are not rewards that I would consider would have a huge impact on the board. And the only one that I would give an exception to is unrefusable offer. That is a rare, so you aren't going to see this card very often, but it is a cost of 2, yellow aspect. You attach it to a non-leader unit, and then it has a bounty. If you defeat that unit, you will get to play that unit for free under your control. It's going to interplay ready, and then at the start of regroup phase, defeat it. So unrefusable offer is great to put on a really big target the opponent has. If you defeat it, then you get to use it once. But otherwise, the rewards for bounties are much more modest. And because the bounty rewards are modest, I think we want to place at least upgrade bounties on units that we are looking to capture or defeat anyway. So, for example, one good target for a bounty could be the opponent's biggest threat. Let's say the opponent has a big unit. It means that we are in a losing board state and we have to take it out immediately. Well, let's go ahead and put a bounty on it, and so when we defeat that unit, we get a little bit extra reward. Right? Or another example could be there is a unit that we want to ambush. We have an ambush in our hand, we intend to play it, ambush the opponent's unit, that unit will be defeated, our ambusher will survive. Well, let's go ahead and put a bounty on the unit before we ambush it, just to get a little bit more value. So again, for most bounties, I like to think of them as like icing on the cake. Right? We really want the cake, right? Our main goal, units that we are going to take out anyway, but we're gonna squeeze out a little bit extra reward out of them. Okay. We also want to note that the value of some bounty rewards are highly conditional. So let's take a bounty called Wanted. It's 0 cost, yellow. The bounty is to ready 2 friendly resources, and we know how valuable that reward is for anyone who has played Boba Fett in Spark of Rebellion. We know that being able to ready 2 friendly resources can be incredibly useful. But how useful is that ability on a bounty? Well, we have to remember that in order to get the value of that bounty, we'll need to have exhausted resources. So let's say we played Wanted on an opponent's unit, and we have the initiative, it's our first play. Well, we're not going to want to attack that unit right away, because if we defeat that unit, we won't be able to ready any resources because all of our resources will be ready. So in order to get the reward, we'll need to have spent resources before we take out that unit, right? So there's a chance that the reward that we get with this bounty, we won't actually even be able to take advantage of it. Right? Another situation where Wanted might be problematic is, let's say the opponent has the initiative and they decide to take their unit with bounty and they ram it into one of our units and it defeats their unit, but then while we get to collect the bounty, we don't get to get any value because all of our resources will be ready. So there'll be lots of opportunities for the opponent to counterfeit the reward on this bounty, and hence the reward on this bounty is highly conditional. Versus a bounty like Guild Target, where the bounty is to deal 2 damage to a base. If the unit is unique, deal 3 damage. In this situation, we can take the reward for this bounty pretty much at any time, and it'll always be useful because we always want to damage the opponent's base. And the opponent will always have a base because as long as the game is going, the base will be there to damage. So this bounty reward for Guild Target has much less conditions to be useful. It'll almost always be useful in any situation. So as we are looking at these bounties, we want to consider when can we take advantage of these bounty rewards. We also need to be creative in how we use our bounties, because we could actually play them on our own units, provided that those units get bonuses for being upgraded. So I have included down here 8 cards that take advantage of situations where units are upgraded, right? So for example, the Gar Saxton. Each friendly upgraded unit gets +1/+0. And it gains when defeated. You may return an upgrade that was attached to this unit to its owner's hand. So in that situation, if we need a unit to push more damage, then maybe we put a bounty on one of our own units and it gets +1/+0, because maybe we'll get more value of that +1/+0 than we will giving the opponent the chance to take a bounty, right? So all of these cards here have advantages for when you put bounties on them, or in this case upgrades. And I also included Bosk because there's an action where we can damage a unit with bounty, but then we have the option to also give it +1/+0. So maybe giving the opponent the reward might be worth the trade-off, because we can pump our unit +1/+0. So maybe we play a Bosk red-yellow deck and we have a Wanted, but we put the Wanted on our own unit. And then we can deal 1 damage to it, give it +1/+0, and then we crash it into the opponent before they get a chance to spend resources. So there's some, again, creative situations here where putting bounties on our own units could be useful. So you want to keep that in mind. Now, the second mechanic we're going to talk about is capture. Again, the rules for capture are, well, first of all, it's a form of temporary removal. When a unit is captured, we defeat its upgrades, we will remove all of its damage counters, and we're going to place it face down underneath the unit that captured it, and that will be known as the guarding unit. The captured unit remains out of play until its guarding unit leaves play. So maybe that guarding unit is defeated, maybe the guarding unit gets bounced. After which the captured unit will be rescued, in which case it's going to re-enter play exhausted and under its owner's control. Now, it's important to note that rescued units are not considered played, so any when played abilities will not be triggered when those units are rescued. Okay. So what are my thoughts on capture? Well, as I researched the capture mechanic and I looked at all the cards in the set, I found that only 8 cards in the entire set can capture. 3 of those cards are common, 3 are rare, 2 are legendary. So first off, it's important to note that capturing, I think, will actually happen. We're going to encounter it in draft far less than we would in constructed, right? Again, draft is a format where the decks are often not optimized, and so we are subject most often to mechanics that are within commons and uncommons. And so since only 3 common cards can capture, we're not really going to be capturing very often, right? Now, it's important to note that 2 of the commons are green and 1 is yellow. So we only have to be aware of capturing if we are facing a green deck and possibly a yellow deck. Now, if we do deal with capture, maybe we are playing green, ideally we would want to capture units that don't have damage or have little damage, and that they have upgrades, especially bounties. That's because when a unit gets captured, all of the damage gets removed. So if we have a unit that has a lot of damage, then we would probably rather want to defeat it and then dedicate capturing to a unit where we haven't damaged it, that we haven't dedicated any actions to. We also want to take out any upgraded units, since the unit will lose all upgrades should that unit get rescued. Now, the ideal guarding units are units that are difficult to remove, they're difficult to bounce, they're difficult to capture, they're difficult to interact with. And so good guarding units would include leaders, because leaders cannot be captured, units that have high health, units that have shields, as well as units in arenas with friendly sentinels, because the sentinels are going to absorb most of the attacks, etc. Okay. Now, since there are only 8 cards at capture, I'm going to share those cards with you right now. So the yellow card is Relentless Pursuit. This captures units that cost the same or less than the unit that we're targeting. Now, one thing that I also need to check in the rule book is that if the friendly unit that we choose is a leader, is the cost considered its deploy cost? I imagine yes, but we're going to need to look at the rule book to verify that. All right. That's Relentless Pursuit. One of the green capture cards is Take Captive. This only requires you that you have a unit in the same arena. You can capture it, which is great, which means you can capture big units with smaller units. And lastly is a Discerning Veteran, which is a common, and it can capture any non-leader ground unit, and that's incredibly useful. I actually think that makes Discerning Veteran one of the most valuable commons in the entire set. So make sure to look out for that card. Now, the rare cards that capture include the rare leader Jabba the Hutt. It can capture when it's deployed. It's to note also too that it's another friendly unit captures an enemy non-leader unit. So that means you can also use this power in space as well. Elephant Mon can capture enemy units that attack your base, right? But you do need to make sure that you have a friendly unit in that arena. And Legal Authority. This allows you to capture a unit that has less power than the unit that is guarding. Okay. And just to wrap it up, what are the 2 legendary cards that capture? The Finalizer. Again, you can see that if you have a ton of units, you can do lots of capturing. And Rule with Respect, where you can capture all the units that attacked your base this turn. Of course, it means that you could, like, one unit could be capturing 3 or 4 units, which will make that unit a really big target for your opponent. Okay, but those are all the cards that I could find in the set that can capture. That you could be facing in draft. There are some capture cards in the starter set, but you will not be dealing with those cards. The last mechanic we're going to talk about is Smuggle. Here are the rules for Smuggle. If a card with Smuggle has been resourced, its controller may play the card by paying its Smuggle cost, and you'll see the Smuggle cost in the ability text box. Note that the card being played with Smuggle may be used as a resource to help pay for its own Smuggle cost, so keep that in mind. When the card is played, the top card of the deck is immediately resourced, and it comes in, of course, exhausted. So most Smuggle costs will be on units. So, for example, the Night Owl Skirmisher. If this were resourced, you could play it with Smuggle by paying 5. Provided that you have a red aspect and a heroism aspect. We also see Smuggle in events like Commission. This card allows you to draw for a bounty hunter item or transport. So what are my thoughts on Smuggle? Well, first of all, resourcing cards with Smuggle effectively increases our hand size. We no longer have to worry about resourcing a card and never being able to play it again. Now we can resource a card, and effectively that card is still in hand. It just costs a little bit more. That's incredibly useful. It also means that we get to play cards when we need them. So maybe we don't need an ambusher right away. Well, if that ambusher has smuggle, we can just resource it, and we can wait to play that unit until we actually need that ambush ability. The flexibility of smuggle provides a lot of extra value in draft. Be able to have more actions than what is just in our hand is useful. The fact that we'll have more actions even though maybe our cards are exhausted, maybe we run out of cards in our hand but we still have things to do, that provides extra value. So for example, let's take Privateer Crew, right? It's a 2-cost green 2/2. Not really that special. However, it does have a smuggle where we can pay 6 for it, and when we play it with smuggle, it adds 3 experience tokens, which effectively makes it a 5/5. This makes Privateer Crew an incredibly flexible card. So if you recall, when we were evaluating cards based off of the quadrant, without smuggle, Privateer Crew would be maybe like a C- card in the opening and an F everywhere else. However, because it has smuggle, now we could also say that it is a maybe C+, B- tier card when we are facing parity or when we have a winning board. That provides so much more value to this card, right? So now it has some use in multiple quadrants. Or take, for example, a card like Jetpack. Maybe we don't necessarily need a shield right away, but as soon as we see a unit that opponent's unit that we need to defeat, we can put the Jetpack on one of our units. We can attack with it, and we don't have to worry about our opponent, our unit taking damage, and we can defeat the opponent's unit with the bonus. Right? So I'm going to definitely be looking to add as many smuggle cards into my deck as possible. Another thing to note is that as a general rule, we're going to want to pay costs with resources that have smuggle first to minimize the impact of an opponent's scanning officer. So what the heck does scanning officer do? It's a 2-cost green aspect, 2/3 Imperial Official. When played, you reveal 3 enemy resources. Defeat each resource with smuggle keyword revealed this way. And for each resource defeated this way, its controller puts the top card of their deck into play as a resource. So why does that mean that we are going to want to exhaust our smuggle resources first? Well, if a scanning officer targets a ready resource that has smuggle, if that resource is defeated, while we get to replace that resource, the new resources are going to come in exhausted. And that could ruin a turn. Like, imagine the scanning officer targets 3 of our ready resources. They all have smuggle. And so those cards are defeated, and all those resources now are exhausted. That could wreck our turn. So in general, we're going to want to spend those smuggle resources as soon as we can before a scanning officer can get to them. Now, with that said, as games get more savvy, maybe scanning officers will start targeting exhausted resources, knowing that people are going to play this rule. In this situation, might we want to keep the smuggle cards that we want to keep them ready so that the scanning officer avoids them? Possibly. But while we might be giving away which resources are smuggled by spending them early, I think that is a small price to pay, knowing that we'll be able to spend those resources. So yes, it might be a tell, but still, I think making sure that we can spend our resources each turn will be worth it. So make sure you spend those smuggled resources first. So let's do a quick review of important notes regarding the Shadows of the Galaxy mechanics. Starting with bounty, we want to place them on units we are looking to capture or defeat anyway. If we have units that get bonuses when upgraded, consider playing your own bounties on those units. Regarding capture, it's primarily a mechanic in green. Of the 8 cards it can capture, only 3 are common. The rest are rare and legendary, so we're not going to face captures very often. If we do, we ideally want to capture units with lots of upgrades and little damage. We ideally want to place captured units under guards that are difficult to defeat, capture, or interact with. Lastly, when it comes to smuggle, resource cards with smuggle effectively stay in our hand with a slightly higher cost. The optionality of playing resource smuggle cards provides those cards as extra value, so we want to prioritize them in draft. And paying resources with smuggle first before a scanning officer can defeat them will ensure that we do not lose those resources if scanning officer gets played. So now that we have the set mechanics out of the way, I want to start talking about cards in the set. And I'm going to be focusing on commons and uncommons since we're going to be facing them the most in draft. And the first card I want to focus on is Follower of the Way. I feel like this card really epitomizes the design of the set. It's 2-cost blue, 1/3 Mandalorian. While this unit is upgraded, it gets +1/+1. So it really emphasizes the importance of upgrades, and how much extra beefy that a unit that's upgraded can get, right? So with an experience, one experience token on Follower of the Way, it makes it a 3/5, which is a really great stat line for at 2 cost. You could put bounties on it. You could put shields on it. So there's going to be a lot of synergies and a lot of building regarding upgraded units. Okay. Another unit that gets benefits from upgrade is Super Commando Squad, 5 cost, but we're including villainy in this, 4/4 shielded, and as long as the unit is upgraded, it has Sentinel as well. So it comes in as a Sentinel because it comes in with a shield, and then once that shield is exhausted, well, you can put another shield on it, and it'll have Sentinel. You could put an experience token on it and have Sentinel. You could put a bounty on it and it'll have Sentinel. So I really think Super Commando Squad can go a long way in protecting that ground arena. And so definitely if I saw this card late in a pack, I would definitely think that blue villainy could be an open lane. Last card I want to note is Clan Ren Rescuer. It's 2, this is the time in heroism. It's only a 1/2 Mandalorian Trooper. When played, gives an experience token to a unit. Now, the stats on this unit are not very good. Even if you include the experience token, that means that you're spending 2 resources for 5 units of power and health, right? Not really great stats. We've seen better stats, for example, for Battlefield Marine in Spark, where it's 2 cost and you get 6 units worth of power and health. The reason, though, why I think Rescuer will probably be better than advertised is the way in which we get some of those stats. In this case, it's because it can provide an experience. We've already seen a lot of the cards, if you go back to the slide when we talk about bounties, that get benefits for being upgraded. Clan Ren Rescuer essentially unlocks that value. So keep in mind that if you see this late in the game, then you might need this card in order to enable those useful upgrade units later on. So for example, if you're playing red and you have a Clan Rescuer, maybe you need a Clan Ren Rescuer in order to take advantage to give that unit overwhelm. Moving on to green, I want to note this Bounty Hunter's Quarry. Now, I've mentioned that we have to be careful about bounties because they're highly conditional. But the reward for this bounty, I think, will always be useful. In this case, the bounty is to search the top 5 cards of your deck, or 10 cards instead of if this unit is unique. And for a unit that costs 3 or less, we get to play it for free. That is incredibly useful. And if we're drafting properly, many of our cards, specifically units, should be costing 2 or 3. So that is a lot of value. That said, I don't think it's necessarily the best mono green card here. I still think that belongs to the veteran that captures. But I do think Bounty Hunter's Quarry is one of the more useful bounties in the set. I also like Salacious Crumb, the villainy green card here. 1/1/3. When played, heal damage to a base, and the action is to exhaust it, and we have to return the unit to the owner's hand, and we get to deal 1 damage to a ground unit. This is going to be such an annoying card in the set, which is very appropriate considering it's Salacious Crumb. We can use Salacious Crumb to ping shields out of the way. We can use Salacious Crumb to deal extra damage. We could use Salacious Crumb to heal from our base and keep us alive. And then the opponent is going to have to expend resources to defeat Salacious Crumb if they don't want to deal with that annoyance. So even if we only get like a heal from the base and the opponent is forced to attack into Salacious Crumb, well, that effectively saves our base from attack. So I do see Salacious Crumb as an incredibly useful card that will have value, not just in early game, but also in late game when we have a chance to put down Sentinels. It'll be protected, and then Salacious Crumb can just ping and heal, ping and heal, ping and heal. Last card I want to look at here in green is Sundari Peacekeeper. It is 3 and has some really great stats. 1/5, also a Mandalorian and a Trooper. But it has Raid 2, which effectively gives it 2 extra stats when attacking, and it has Restore 2. So it is an all-around, like, all-star. Amazing stats, heals, attacks, does everything that you want to do. So I think it is a really solid common. And it's only 3 resources, so look out for this one. So as for notable red cards, I want to go back to Guild Target. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about bounties. We know that the bounty here is going to be useful in any context. I also think that this card will create some really difficult decisions for our opponent. Considering that if we're playing red, we are likely going to play an aggro strategy in which we are going to do as much damage to the base, to the opponent's base as we can. If we attach Guild Target to an opponent's unit, we could decide to attack the unit and be able to do damage to the base, or we could choose to ignore the unit. In which case, what will the opponent do with that unit? Will that opponent try to attack, use that unit to attack our units? Well, if they do, they're going to put damage on that opponent's unit, which means that it's getting closer to getting defeated, which means it's getting closer to doing damage to their base. Or they want to keep that unit alive and they just use it to attack our base. Well, if we're playing the beatdown, that's a good thing for us because that means our aggressive units are going to stay on the board and they're going to continue to damage the base. And likely will be able to outrace the opponent. So Guild Target can create some really some issues regarding what the opponent can do. They can't easily just defeat our units and stop the aggro without taking damage themselves. So I really like Guild Target. I wouldn't mind actually playing multiples, honestly, of this card. The villainy card we'll look at is Guavian Antagonizer. It's 2/3 Saboteur with bounty draw card. Now, there are a few cards that have this 2/3 stat line for one and have the bounty of draw a card. But I specifically like the Guavian Antagonizer because it has Saboteur. That means that as long as you have the initiative, you are going to be putting the opponent on a clock. You are going to be able to get that 2 damage to the opponent's base. And that means that it is going to pose an immediate threat very early, and the opponent is going to need to address it fast. And so having multiple of these antagonizers, I think, is going to be very, very useful in a Villainy aggro deck. By that same token, I think Ketsu Onyo is going to be useful as well. 3/2 with Saboteur. And we also don't want to sniff at the fact that when it deals combat damage to a base, we can defeat upgrades. So we can get rid of our opponent's bounties. We can get rid of opponent's shields. We can get rid of opponent's experience. So Ketsu Ono will, again, accelerate the opponent's clock while taking out any of the advantages that they might have. Moving on to yellow cards. I want to look at a new adventure here. It is a double yellow, which means likely we are going to be paying this with an aspect penalty, so we're probably paying it for 4. But the text, I think, will be useful enough to pay for 4. So what it does is it returns a non-leader unit that costs 6 or less to its owner's hand. Then its owner may play it for free. This has a lot of different uses. First off, we could play it on our own units, preferably a unit that has already attacked. Maybe that opponent, or maybe that unit that attacked already had a ton of damage on it. Well, we're playing a new adventure, we basically get to wipe out all of that damage. Also, if that unit has a wind plate ability, we also get to trigger that wind plate ability a second time. Okay. We could also use a new adventure to target an opponent's unit, an opponent's guarding unit, and rescue our own unit. So I think this card has a lot of uses, both offensively and defensively, that I think it is going to be worth drafting, even if we have to pay 4 for it. For Villainy, I've been looking at this card for some time, Lurking TIE Phantom. It's only a 2/2, but the fact that it has Raid 2 and that it can't be captured, damaged, or defeated is going to make Lurking TIE Phantom a problem. It means that we can more easily, more safely upgrade this unit, since we don't have to worry about events just damaging this unit. The opponent is going to have to attack into Lurking TIE Phantom in order to defeat it. Now, mind you, it won't get the Raid 2 bonus when it gets attacked, but it is going to be a very big distraction. So the fact that it's difficult to interact with, I think, makes Lurking TIE Phantom definitely a card that we should be looking out for. As for the heroism side, I'm looking at Principled Outlaw. It's a 4/4, 4 cost, but the on attack that you may exhaust a ground unit, I think, is incredibly useful. Obviously, it's going to be even more useful if we have the initiative, but the fact that we essentially get to neutralize the opponent's best ground unit, I think, is incredibly powerful. So, yeah, look out for that card. Other notable cards, these are more kind of like the heroism villainy cards. Starting with Villainy, want to look at Toro Calican, the 3/3/5. Great stats. And when we get to play another Bounty Hunter unit, we can deal 1 damage to that Bounty Hunter, and then we get to ready Toro. So that is pretty amazing. You get 2 attacks with Toro when you get to play Bounty Hunters. Man, that's pretty darn awesome. From the heroism side, I'm looking at Grey Squadron Y-Wing. It's a 2 cost, 1/3. On attack, the opponent gets to choose a unit or base they control. You may deal 2 damage to it. Now, obviously, it's not great that the opponent gets to choose that 2 damage, but I think more importantly, the Grey Squadron Y-Wing does 3 total damage. in that case, I think that makes this a really, really useful card, especially for aggro. Because either that means that we get to take out their opponent's units early, or we get to do some extra damage. So I really like this card, especially at 2 cost, really useful in the opening, and I think it can also be useful in winning board. Last card we're going to look at here is Mercenary Gunship. It's 2 cost, 3/2, and has very weird action, where you can pay 4, and you get to take control of the unit, and that any player can use this ability might seem a little bit scary. However, consider that it costs 4. So imagine that you play Mercenary Gunship on curve at 2 resources. That means the opponent won't be able to take control of this unit until the 3rd turn, and if they do take control of it on the 3rd turn, they can't do anything else. So that tells me that this Mercenary Gunship is you're likely, more often than not, going to get a lot of value in the early game before the opponent gets a chance to take control of it. So I definitely see Mercenary Gunship as like an A-level, A+ card in the opening. And, you know, if you get it late, then you just resource it. So I do think Mercenary Gunship will be very useful, especially in aggro decks. Now, lastly, I want to cover trap rares and legendaries. These are cards that might seem useful at first, but they are almost going to have little to no value in draft. And the first card I want to go over is Endless Legions. It is has such a powerful card. You get to reveal any number of resources you control, and you get to play each unit for free. I know a lot of constructed players are going to be looking to play out this card, trying to cheat, try to ramp out to it. But in draft, this card is useless. First off, most obviously the cost is too high, right? It's a 14 cost, but it's double green. And we know that we're highly unlikely to play double colors in draft, so we're likely paying 16 resources for it. Okay? It's going to be difficult to ensure our survival before we can play it. And once we play it, we're going to be close to running out of cards in our deck, right? Because remember, we can only put down 1 resource per turn. So that means we are going to go 15 turns. And in 15 turns, how many cards are we going to draw? 30 cards. We only have 30 cards in our deck. So by the time we play Endless Legions, we'll have decked out, and we will be damaging ourselves 6 damage to our base per turn. Now, is it possible that we will have so many amazing units that we won't need to draw and we can finish off the game with Endless Legions? Possibly, but we will need the units that we're playing from Endless Legions to ready in order to get that massive attack. By that time, we could be dead. So Endless Legions is more going to be like a value pick. If you want to get a legendary that will likely have value on the secondary market, then go ahead and grab it. But you are likely not to play this card in draft. The other trap card I want to talk about is the Chaos of War. It's 3 cost, but it's double red, which means we're likely playing it for 5. And we're going to deal damage to each player's base equal to the number of cards in that player's hand, right? Playing for 5 cost isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the question is how much value are we going to get, right? Most draft games have both opponents holding at maximum 2-card hands, and that's because we are often playing just what we have in hand to build up the board. So, like, in what scenario are we going to take advantage of an opponent that has like 5-6 cards in hand? It's likely not going to happen. And unlike For a Cause I Believe In from Spark of Rebellion, we don't get any other extra benefits. At least in For a Cause I Believe In, we get to filter our deck, we get to get rid of cards that we don't want, and we get to control which cards we're drawing on the next turn. Chaos of War doesn't even allow us to do that. So what happens when we play for 5? We do 2 damage to the opponent and probably 1 damage to us? Not a lot of value. So again, this is a card that's likely going to be passed around, but unless you really want this rare, and it ends up being worth a lot, you're probably going to want to pass this. And that's the end of the video. So thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please like, subscribe, and comment. And please watch my other draft videos. Hopefully, in a couple of weeks, I'll do a follow-up, trying to update you on my thoughts on the set as I do more drafts. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope the Force is with you. And until next time, I hope you take care. Peace out.